All right, we'll go back on the record in case people versus Brandon Martin, RIF 1506112. Record should reflect Mr. Martin is present with both counsel. The people are present. All members of our jury and alternates are present. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. We are ready to continue. We're in the midst of cross-examination. Doctor, I'll remind you, you're under the same oath that was administered to you this morning. All right, Mr. Beach.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Hello.
All right, so where we left off, I was going through syndrome by syndrome regarding the current psychiatric complaints that Mr. Martin, Brandon Martin, presented with on January 12th, 2013, correct?
Yes.
All right, and I think we're at page 3, if I think you were kind of following along.
Yes.
All right, and before we broke, I think you said something and I didn't quite understand it, and I want to make sure I understand it. You said that you knew what I was doing and that there's a reason why that these are, there's no evidence or no symptoms in these categories. Is that correct?
Yes, as any other lay person would do.
Right.
Yeah.
And just so we're on the same page, I'm not trying to attack your diagnosis.
No.
So you, at the end of this day, you diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, right?
Correct.
All right, fair enough. But also what's important is he did not exhibit other symptoms such as, well, going to page 4. Well, actually, let's go to page 6.
I don't know where you look. We are talking still about the initial evaluation?
Yes, and it's on the very bottom.
Pages are not in order, so I have to look through all of them.
If you go to the back, if you go to the very back, the pages are
1, 12, 13.
Correct. It's not in order, but go to the back of those pages to the end.
Okay. Yes.
And do you see where they're? Do you see page 6?
4, 5, 6. Yes.
Okay. And so what Mr. Martin, Brandon Martin, did not present is any indication of suicidal ideation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Meaning that there's no evidence that he's about to commit suicide.
Correct.
All right. No evidence of suicidal plan, correct?
Correct.
And then no prior suicidal attempts or suicide attempts, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then down below, homicidal assaultive ideation present, yes or no?
No.
And it was no. So there was no indication that these voices, and just so we're clear, these voices that he was hearing, this was presented to you by his father, is that right?
Right.
Okay. And it said that he heard that Brandon was hearing voices.
Actually, he didn't say exactly that.
I think that would be the page right before 2. It's not numbered. I have people
in my head.
In my mind or in my head?
In my mind.
Okay.
I have people talking in my mind.
Okay. And that was according to his father, correct? And that's a big symptom for paranoid schizophrenia. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
All right. Now, if going back to page 4.
Yes.
We're looking now at the psychotic symptoms. And the paranoid, under delusions, you did put a little plus there, meaning that he had delusions, right? And they were the paranoid type.
Yes.
Meaning that's he was being guarded, right? That's one aspect of it. There's others I think you testified to.
Yes.
All right. And then hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, meaning hearing.
Yes, people talking in his head.
Got it. All right. And the duration was about 1 month, 2 to 3 months for those, is that correct?
Yes.
And there's some persistent or recurrent experience of detachment, which is about a duration of 1 month or so.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's the crux of your initial evaluation and the foundation for your diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia.
Right.
All right. Now, moving on, you're also asking him about ADHD syndrome symptoms, correct?
No symptoms.
And there's no symptoms there. And then there's no symptoms with regard to hyperactivity, impulsive sets of symptoms.
Yes, correct.
Doctor, I wonder if you can adjust that microphone just so that you're speaking into it. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Now, moving on to substance abuse syndromes. The alcohol, there's a minus there, right?
I'm sorry?
There's no indication of any alcohol abuse.
Right, he's not. No.
Okay. And this is according to Mr. Martin's father, Michael Martin.
Correct.
Right? Or his mother, correct? And or Brandon Martin. This is the information you're getting.
Yes.
Right? So if one of or more of them said, actually, he parties a lot, he drinks a lot of alcohol, then you'd have a little plus sign there.
Yes.
Okay. Amphetamines, same thing. If they told you that he was smoking meth at these parties, then there would be a little plus sign there, correct?
Right.
All right. Cannabis, there is a plus sign there.
Yes.
Meaning that you did get information.
Yes.
And that he started smoking marijuana since high school.
Right.
All right. And about, at least according to the information that you received, 1 per day.
That's what I got. That was the first visit, so that's what I got.
Okay.
I don't remember whom exactly told me that.
Okay. But again, that's the foundation of a potential diagnosis, though. Would you agree?
Well, when there is a plus for marijuana, the diagnosis is very clear. Marijuana abuse. It's a drug like any other drugs, and it's abuse or dependence.
Okay. And let's say that you smoked marijuana one time, and I'm not making any judgment or accusation, all right? But let's say you smoke a joint. Now, are you going to have a plus there, and are you a marijuana abuser or dependent?
No, probably I would say here experimented.
Okay. What if it's like 2 joints?
Same.
Same. So we're talking more than just a social experimental aspect of marijuana use.
It's a habit. It's once a day.
Once a day. This is chronic.
Yes.
You would agree with that?
Yes.
All right. Now, next to cocaine, there's also a minus there too.
Correct.
If you had information that he had been using cocaine recreationally at parties, would there be a plus there?
Yes.
All right. And then under that, there's other hallucinogens, inhalants, PCP, hypnotics. What type of drugs are we talking about there?
Any other drugs?
Like
PCP, LSD, acid, ecstasy, bath salts, anything.
All right. But there's a minus there.
It's a minus there.
Okay, meaning that there was no information that you had regarding that.
Correct.
And again, if there was information that you received that again, he was using ecstasy at parties, recreationally, then there would be a plus.
It would be a plus.
Now, why is that important as far as cannabis, cocaine, and hallucinogens? Well, why do you care about that? Why do you want to know about Brandon Martin's drug history or drug activities?
Because that's part of the mental status exam. It's part of the whole picture of the patient, besides somatic things, symptoms of other psychiatric syndromes or diseases, and substance abuse. It's a part of evaluation that done by any psychiatrist.
Okay. Now, the fact that there is, at least the information you received, was limited to cannabis, correct?
Yes.
And that information that you received, how is that important, though? And going on to page 5, I see underlined a diagnostic code for cannabis abuse. Do you see that?
5, not on page number 5, but
it's the next page.
On page
you were on
number 7.
Okay. we were just a minute ago talking about page 4. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. So next page would be page 5?
correct.
All right.
But I don't see any diagnosis.
Okay. Do you see where it says remission status in the top of the page?
Yes,
And then down below, do you have an underline on your page?
yes, cannabis abuse.
Cannabis abuse.
Mhm.
Okay. And then is that meaning that that's something you may be trying to rule out, that you learned that he's a chronic cannabis user, and so that's something that of important information for you?
It is important information, but it's not sure information. It came from the father, was not confirmed by the patient. It's questionable in one of the questionnaires. It was put a question mark if he's using it or not.
Okay.
For how long, I don't know. So I don't know what importance has this fact.
Now, do you know what the term junk in, junk out means?
No. Junk in, junk out?
Junk in, junk out. You've never heard that in your field? Meaning that your diagnosis is only as good as the information that you receive?
Correct.
Okay. And in this case, you're provided information with regard to the cannabis use by his father, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you would agree that oftentimes children aren't going to be smoking meth in front of their dads, right? For them to see?
Haven't heard about that ever.
Okay. Or doing snorting lines of cocaine in front of their dads, right?
No.
They're not. So again, so this is information that you're receiving from the father, but you don't know really what the history is.
Correct. That's very correct. Yes.
All right. Now, going back to page 5, let's go to the alertness and orientation. At that time, actually, let's go back up. His appearance was neat that day when you met him, correct?
Yes.
All right. And then with regard to the alertness and orientation, he was fully alert. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And he was oriented to person, place, time, and circumstance.
Correct.
Right? That means he knew who he was.
Yes.
Yes. He knew where he was. And he knew the time and why he was there.
Correct.
Okay. So in other words, if there was some evidence of him saying, I am in hell and I'm surrounded by demons and I need to kill these demons, there probably wouldn't be so many check marks there, right?
Probably, or if he keeps this information hidden and he thinks somewhat that is not appropriate to share this information, I would not know.
Right, but you can't get into his head. You don't know what he's thinking.
Exactly.
All right. And there's no indication from father or mother that he's been going around saying, I'm in hell and surrounded by demons, right?
No.
Or that there's little green men around that I need to kill, anything like that, right?
Right, not exactly with these words, but the father was saying that I have people talking in my mind.
Right. But those people, I mean, those people could be Jiminy Cricket sitting on his shoulder telling him to do good, for all you know. Right?
Yes, we can only assume, but could have been at the same time a demon telling him to kill people, and he didn't detail about that.
Right. But you would expect that would be an important piece of information if it was known.
If it was a no?
If it was known.
Oh, if it was known, yes, very, very important, yes.
If Mr. Martin or Mrs. Martin said, you know what, Brandon was going around saying that these demons were telling him to like hurt animals, you would expect that would come out in this.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, but probably they didn't hear him saying this thing.
Right,
yes.
Right. His attitude was guarded and suspicious, which is consistent with somebody with paranoid schizophrenia.
Correct, yes.
Excessive activity regarding motor activity, again, consistent with your
restless,
diagnosis.
Yes.
All right. His mood was happy.
Yes.
Which would be normal, I guess. I don't know. You tell me.
Would you be happy to be seen by a psychiatrist?
I don't know.
Okay.
His affect, though, was inappropriate, constricted, expansive, and labile, right?
Yes.
Which is, again, consistent with your diagnosis.
Correct.
All right. Going down to his speech, rapid, loud, excessive, all parts of paranoia, or schizophrenia, I should say.
All part of a mental illness going on. All part of a mental illness that was going on.
That was going on, okay. And then we already talked about the flight of ideas,
Yes.
right? And then his memory was impaired. He can, my understanding is when you're talking to him, you tell him chair, tree, watch, and then remember those three objects, and then you keep talking to him, and then after 5 minutes, you say, hey, remember those three things? Repeat them back to me. And he was only able to do one.
One.
Okay. And so, and that's the basis of your opinion that he had impaired
Yes.
memory. Okay. His concentration was impaired, right?
Concentration was impaired.
Okay. And then you did the count backwards from 100 by 7.
Yeah.
So it would be 100, 93, 87, 80.
86.
Right. 80, okay. Okay. I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician. There's a reason why I went to law school.
Me neither.
All right. Abstraction, Proverbs, he was impaired. What's that?
So when somebody is reasoning normally, can ask, can you give me a proverb? And if he's very concrete, his abstract thinking doesn't work at all, concentration, memory are impaired, he cannot provide you with a proverb.
Okay. And then intelligence is average, correct?
Yes.
And were you told that he was an average student in school as well? Or how did you know?
That was just an impression for the day.
Okay.
I didn't dwell into this because it was not a very important element for the diagnosis.
You didn't give him an IQ test, right?
No.
Because there was no indication that he had some sort of intellectual disability, right?
That's correct.
All right. Self-perception intact. And then again, going on to the suicide and then the homicide risk, all that was either very low or not
existent.
Non-existent. Now let's talk about that. Let's say he said something to the effect of, these people that brought me in, who are saying are my parents, Melody and Michael Martin, are actually demons, and I need to kill them. Let's say he told you that kind of on the side, like kind of whispered it in your ear. Okay. What would you do in that?
Call 911, put him on a 5150, send him to the hospital. That's pure danger to other thinking. And given the fact that he was not on medication, the danger was even higher. So I couldn't guarantee that in the next 5 minutes he's not going to do what he thinks about his parents that are demons.
Right.
So that's what the doctors in an office do when it's this kind of situation.
So on January, I'm forgetting the date. January, was it 3rd? On that January date, you didn't call 911?
No.
Okay. You didn't ask that January 12th, 2013, you didn't ask that he be put on a psych hold under welfare and institutions code?
It was not the situation in either of the visits I had with him.
Okay. So that was going to be my next question, so we'll just kind of move on. So you saw him on January 12th, 2013. You already testified that there was no need to call 911. On February 23rd, 2013, again, you checkmarked, or somebody checkmarked here. It looks like your handwriting. Homicidal, no. Do you see that page where it says 213? 13.
I have to get there. 213.
Yep.
I don't see that page. 213.
There, I promise you, I think you testified on direct.
No, 213, 2013, February. I found 223rd,
Oh,
2013.
maybe I need to take one of those memory tests. All right, 223, 2013. Okay, and paranoia was present, correct? And if you go to the middle of the page.
Paranoia present, yes.
Okay, so he's still consistent with your initial diagnosis, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then under that is homicidal, no.
No, suicidal, no.
And suicidal, no. So no need to call 911 that day.
Correct.
All right. Now, if you flip one page back to 2814, I'm pretty sure I got it right that time.
2814, yes.
No suicidal ideation, and I'm assuming no homicidal ideation according to your notes. Under thought content.
Correct.
Okay. And you didn't have to call 911 and demand a 5150 hold.
Correct.
All right. If you flip back to another page, 10/11/2014, the next year. I'm sorry, not the next year, the
10/11/2014, yes.
right, 8 months later, you saw him. Again, he's actually on this date, you put rule out schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia. Is that right?
Yes.
And if he's already diagnosed with schizophrenia, why are you trying to rule it out?
It's not a carved in stone, the diagnosis. It's fluid. It's a working diagnosis. And don't forget that this is like more than 1 year interval from the previous visit.
Okay.
So I keep 4 rule outs in the back of my mind, and I was watching to see where the case will go. More toward the bipolar disorder, mixed episode with psychotic features, more towards schizoaffective disorder.
Right.
So I don't want just to set clearly a diagnosis as long as I still need elements for that.
And that's what I want to talk about. My understanding is that first in that initial visit back in January of 2013, you diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, but that was a lot of information that you received, and it wasn't substantiated yet. There could be more information that may lead you in another direction.
Yes.
Right? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And that information that you received is the information you received, and so you gave the diagnosis, right?
Correct.
And but my understanding from what you're saying is you don't have a rubber stamp that says paranoid schizophrenia, and then you just stamp that and then call that a visit, right?
It comes to that point after several visits, after knowing the patient, after knowing more details, it comes to a rubber stamp diagnosis.
It comes to a rubber stamp diagnosis?
Yes, at some point.
Because paranoid schizophrenia, even though there's a spectrum, right, of
yes.
paranoid schizophrenia, yes. It is chronic.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Meaning that if you have it, you have it, right?
It has flare-ups and times of stability.
Right, and I understand that. And there is a spectrum, sometimes worse than others, correct?
Correct.
All right. So, and I want to, if you go back to the 2814 date.
2814, yes.
I noticed that one of your diagnoses was marijuana abuse dependence.
Okay.
Marijuana abuse / dependence, is
yes.
that right? Now, before you said that you weren't really ready to call it marijuana abuse or dependence on that initial visit, but now at this visit, you are calling it that.
No, I put a slash there. Is abuse, is dependence, one or another.
And it can be both.
It cannot be both.
Okay. So one cannot abuse marijuana, but also to be dependent upon it?
If one abuses marijuana, will become eventually dependent on it.
So you can have
So
both?
it's like a phase. Dependence is like the next step.
I see what you're saying. So if you're in marijuana abuse, you're in the initial phase.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And then once you do it chronically for a long period of time, you become dependent upon it.
Correct.
And what happens when you have marijuana withdrawal? Once you are dependent?
Well, you have a state of mind that you are seeking actively to get the drug, and you need the drug of choice. The dependence, the withdrawal from marijuana is very mild in comparison with the other drugs that can be abused.
Depending on the type of marijuana, though, correct?
Not. Depends on the fact that marijuana stays in your blood for about 1 month, and the withdrawals are very slowly. The level goes very slowly down, so you don't exhibit withdrawal symptoms like from alcohol or like from heroin.
Have you ever heard of somebody having psychotic episodes or symptoms from marijuana withdrawal?
Not from withdrawal, but from dependence, yes, because if they become dependent, they increase the dose, so at some point their blood can be oversaturated with tetrahydrocannabidiol, and then that affects their brain, and they can become psychotic.
Okay, and what symptoms associated with that psychosis would you see?
It could be any symptom of psychosis, anything, any symptom.
But at any rate, now going back to 2/20, well, going on to 12/20/14, there was no indication that you needed to call 911, correct?
To 12/13?
12/20/14.
12/20/14. Yes, I got it.
Okay. Still paranoid schizophrenia, correct?
Yes.
And no indication here of any homicidal or suicidal ideation?
Correct.
And so no need to call 911?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Jensen?
One area I forgot to ask you about, your initial meeting in December of 2013, you made notes about a GAF scale. Do you remember that?
1 second. January 12/13.
Yes, it's on page 7 of your initial intake.
I don't know where is page 7 because after 4 pages starts another visit.
On the bottom, there's a little number 7.
Yes, I found it.
Thank you. Right there, it says Axis 5 or Axis V, GAF. Do you see that?
Yes.
Would you please explain to us what GAF means?
Is general level of functioning,
Meaning what?
how he maintains social functioning and occupational functioning and self-maintenance.
Okay. And you have the numbers 46 to 48 there. What is the scale?
It's up to 100.
Okay, so from 0 to 100?
Correct.
So if somebody is functioning normally, gets along with others, and basically can do day-to-day tasks, where would you put them on the scale?
At about 60 to 80.
60 to 80, okay. And what number did you attach to Brandon that day?
46, 48.
And what does that mean, 46 to 48?
That means that he was not stable. He was not stable to the level of functioning like any normal person. He was not unstable to go to the hospital like having GAF of 30, 35.
Okay.
So he was somewhere there but unstable.
Thank you. And just so we're clear, in all the meetings that you had with Brandon, did your diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, did that ever change?
I don't remember what was the diagnosis at the very last visit.
Why don't you look at then the December 20 2014 notes.
December 2014, okay. 2014. It was, yes, schizophrenia paranoid and 2 rule-outs.
And on the comment, you wrote unstable, correct?
Correct.
What does that mean?
It means that he was in need of treatment and he was in need of psychotherapy. So at that moment, he was not able to function at a stability level.
And that's the last time you saw him, correct?
I suppose so.
Thank you, that's all.
Mr. Beecham?
No questions, thank you.
Is the doctor excused?
Yes.
You're excused, thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness?
I'll go get it.
I think your defense would call Amy Arias.
Remain standing and face the clerk. Raise your right hand, please.
You solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in the matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? God? Yes. Repeat it.
Take your mask off and adjust the microphone.
Please state, spell your first and your last name for the record.
Amy Arias, Amyarias.
All right, and ladies and gentlemen, this was not one of the names read to you at the outset of this phase of the trial. Does anyone think that they might know Ms. Arias? No one? All right. Ms. Arias, have you ever testified before?
No.
All right, so just a couple of rules about your testimony. First, we need you to use that microphone. You can adjust it if you like, move the base, move your chair, but you do need to speak directly in it, okay?
Yes.
Next rule is when the lawyers ask questions, we need verbal or audible answers. So yes, no, or whatever you want to tell us. But if you just nod your head up and down or shake your head side to side, court reporter can't record that. So make sure you give us words to answers, okay?
Yes.
And then the last rule is please wait until the lawyers are done asking their question before you answer. If you jump into answer thinking you know what you're going to say and you talk with them or at the same time, court reporter can't record that. So please wait until they're done speaking before you respond.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead.
Can I first briefly just give her a packet?
Yes. This is just for refresh recollection?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Arias, what do you do for a living?
I'm a registered nurse,
Where do you work?
County of Riverside,
How long have you been a registered nurse?
16 years,
How long have you worked for the County of Riverside?
6 years,
6.
6.
Do you remember where you were working on September 15 of 2015?
Yes.
Where were you working at that time?
I was working at Arlington campus.
And what type of facility is
Oh, it's a behavioral health. Behavioral health.
that? Behavioral health. Were you working in the emergency unit at that time?
I am the inpatient. I'm inside.
Okay, what does that mean?
ETS is the emergency room, and inpatient is when they get admitted inside the facility for inpatient care.
And the people that are being admitted into the ETS, are they people who have been 5150?
There's some voluntary, and then there's some legal hold, 5150.
And have you always worked at that facility?
Yes.
And you've been there? you said 6 years.
6 years, 6.
So you started, if my math's right, around 2014?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. Do you remember, let me ask you before I get into that, what are your duties in intake?
Basic assessment, initial admission, and then transfers or discharge.
So if someone is coming into intake, do you meet with the patient personally?
Yes, face to face.
What sort of information are you gathering when you meet with that person?
This is our admission paperwork. This is basically asking general questions such as, do you have any pain? Do you have any history of medical conditions? Do you take any medications at home? What type of diet do you take at home?
You're speaking directly to the patient, gathering information.
Yes.
Other than just taking down their answers, are you also evaluating that person?
Yes. For nonverbal cues, which usually is eye contact.
You have training in looking for those sorts of things?
No.
That's just something that you've learned on the job?
Yes.
And I'm guessing when you're speaking with people that are coming in with some mental health disorders, they may not be answering all the questions correctly at times.
If I get an answer, yes.
And then the other way is maybe they're not answering you at all.
Correct. Yes.
Is there a difference on intake of a person who voluntarily comes in or versus a person who's 5150?
No, it's all the same paperwork, all the same questions.
Let me talk to you about 5150. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes.
What does that mean?
It's a legal hold, 72-hour hold.
And is it common at your facility, ETS, for people to be brought there on a 5150 hold?
Yes.
You mentioned that you're in intake, and I'm envisioning that there's an emergency room where a 5150 person is brought. They first go into the emergency room.
Yes.
Is there a time frame that someone spends in the emergency room?
No. It depends on if we have an open bed on the inpatient, if they get the diagnosis to admit. So like if we get a doctor's order to admit inpatient, that's when they'll come to us.
So somebody gets into the emergency room, and if a doctor makes a diagnosis and admits that patient, then the next step for that patient is to go into your facility.
Yes.
Is that outside of the hospital?
No. It's just a hallway.
Like in a different little area?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. And so now that's sort of step two.
Yes, correct.
If you have a person that comes into the emergency room and they don't get a diagnosis, what happens to them?
I'm not sure what happens with them from the emergency room side.
And when you say that someone is given a diagnosis, what do you mean?
Usually we have a diagnosis written on their admit, so I use that information to get what their diagnosis is. So if I have the paperwork to give the diagnosis, I can let you.
And I noticed you're looking through the packet that I had handed you.
Yeah, because that's where the diagnosis would be. It would be on admission.
And did you look at any paperwork before coming to the court today?
I did. I believe he had something. What it is exactly, I don't know. I don't remember.
Let me ask you, do you remember seeing a patient by the name of Brandon Martin on September 15th, 2015?
No.
Have you looked through paperwork that shows your name and his name on there?
I see it here in front of me.
And you see your name?
Yes.
You, by the way, have fantastic printing. Best of any doctor.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
But you see your name and initials on the documents?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
You need an answer.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
And that would indicate that as you're going through it, that as you're speaking to him, you are not only recording the date and time, but also whatever answers to questions.
Yes, it's kind of like the questions we're asking back and forth. I'll ask the question and then I answer depending on the check marks.
And so when you first met Mr. Martin, he had a diagnosis, correct?
Yes, yes.
And would it refresh your recollection if you were able to look through that packet too?
Yes, if I can actually find it, I can give you what it was.
I will object, Your Honor, as lack of foundation.
Sustained.
And that's okay. So he had a diagnosis. What are the typical type of diagnoses that individuals are given when they go into the inpatient?
Objection made.
You understand the question?
It was not really.
All right, so sustained. You want to rephrase?
Sure. Someone is admitted into the hospital, into where you do the inpatient assessment. They have a diagnosis, correct?
From inpatient, yes.
From the emergency room, they get a diagnosis, then they go to step 2, which is you.
Yes.
They have a diagnosis from a doctor, yes?
Yes.
And is that a diagnosis of a mental health disorder of some sort?
It varies. I can't say that a yes or no on that. It varies.
Are people let into your facility if they have, for example, a broken leg?
Are they admitted?
Yeah.
If they come in for broken leg, no.
It's for people that are suffering some sort of mental health disorder, correct?
Not necessarily.
What type of people are admitted into your facility within the hospital?
Usually individual.
Well, you can't give a medical, I understand you can't give a medical diagnosis of that, but I think just generally speaking, what kinds of patients do you have that you intake to admit?
Usually they're individuals that police or ambulance have brought in, or they voluntarily check in for various reasons. Sometimes it's just coming in because they want some medication refill.
Okay. Are you also treating people that have mental disorders?
Me treating? No.
Not you, your facility.
Yes.
And you also have individuals that are coming into the hospital that are on a 5150 hold.
Yes.
Part of your intake process, does that include speaking to family at times?
In the mornings, usually in the daytime, I do in daytime now, so I do more of the family stuff now. Night shift, I did not do any family stuff.
I want to speak to you about your memory regarding Brandon Martin and what you did for him. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Again, you've looked over your notes prior to testifying today.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
What did you do in your assessment or your initial assessment and intake of Brandon Martin?
Actually, I asked him every single question, which he answered everything.
Do you recall noticing anything about his answers to the questions at that point?
What type of notice?
Well, meaning part of what you're trained to do is take down the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
And then part of it also is to sort of evaluate it.
I don't necessarily do the evaluation. I'm more of like the data collection.
So Mr. Martin was able to answer all of your questions.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And what sort of questions are you asking?
What we were saying again, the pain. Are they having any pain at this time? Which looks like he was having a headache or some kind of pressure in his head.
And so when he answered that, you asked him if he was having any pain?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
What did he tell
correct.
you?
What did he say?
Yes.
Oh, I asked him, are you experiencing any pain at this time? And he says yes. And I said, well, out of a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, 0 being nothing, I have a 10. He says, where is the pain? It's in my head. Onset, is it, I said, did you just develop it? Is it chronic? Is it long-term? Have you had it a couple of times? And then quality, I asked him, is it very sharp? Is it a dull pain? Is it stabbing or throbbing? And he said, pressure. And then I said, do you take anything for headaches or method of pain med? What do you take? And he said, medications. So usually at this time, from what I do with everybody in general, is ask, would you like me to get you some Tylenol?
And how did he respond to that?
I'll have to go to whether or not he responded. I don't have the answer on that one directly, what he asked for.
And it seems like there are many pages of questions that you ask someone during their
Mm-hmm. Yes, a lot.
intake, correct?
Mm-hmm.
One of the areas that you fill in the questionnaire is why the person is there, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
Okay. And there's also an area that's under patient demographics.
Mm-hmm.
Call that section.
Are you referring to the initial assessment?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
And so you're asking stuff like, what's your age, date of birth?
Date of birth, what's the vital signs when we did the intake? English.
When Brandon came into your facility, he was 22 years old. Isn't that correct?
Let me check my note to see how old he was. Yes, he was 22.
And is there an area where you would ask a question about whether or not he has a person that needs to be contacted?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That person?
For the communication, the person to be contacted is Melody Martin, which is his mother.
And there's also an area that indicates, and it's under patient demographics, his legal status at the hospital. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what was his legal status on September 16, 2015?
5150.
You have the arrival on unit as September 16, 15. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that date correct to your knowledge?
Yes.
It wasn't September 15?
No.
And again, this would have been, when you met with him was when he was in step 2.
Mm-hmm.
In the
Yes,
intake.
correct.
So if he got to the emergency room, that would have been earlier on, prior to meeting you, correct?
Yeah, when the hold was started, we would have the admission of ETS, emergency room.
There'd be an admission document?
I'm not too familiar with what the nurses do over there.
One of the notes I saw for you is there was a note written indicating when the 5150 hold would be expired. Is that something that you would take note of?
Yes.
Why is that important?
That's usually when the end of the 5150 expires, and we have to get either an extension, which is a 5250, which is a 14-day hold.
So the expiration date and time would be 72 hours from when that person was first placed in the hold, correct?
Yes, correct.
And that's a date that you have to know because that person either has to be released or a separate
Extension, yes, correct, another hold.
Okay, and you referred to that as a 5250.
250. Mm-hmm.
What happens if you have a patient that gets to the end of the 72 hours and there's no 5250 hold? Is a person released if there is not an extension on that 5250 hold?
Objection, relevance, violation.
Stay. Do you recall asking Mr. Martin if he had any history of mental illness?
I believe I asked him if he had if he had any diagnosis of medical or psychiatric.
What did he tell you?
He says he has a history of mental illness with his cousin.
Did Mr. Martin ever tell you that he was under the care of a psychiatrist at that time?
No.
Would that be something that, I guess the reason for the question is to find out whether he was under the care of any other doctor. Is that right?
Correct, correct, if you would answer the question.
You mentioned earlier that there is part of the intake process is to speak to the family, correct?
Part of the intake for the social worker, yes.
And so, are you aware of what the social worker asked the family?
No.
Do you ever speak to the family?
Sometimes when they call, yeah.
Okay. Did you ever-
But we have to get a release of information from the patient.
Did you ever speak to anyone from Mr. Martin's family?
No.
So the answers to the questions that you had were from Mr. Martin directly?
Yes,
Is that
correct.
right? How long did your assessment with him take, roughly?
How long? I'm not sure how long. Averaging from a full is usually about 45 to an hour with just everybody, if we get the whole questions.
The questionnaire that we're referring to has 12 pages. Is that correct?
About that, looks like we have some medicine in here too.
Looking at page 10 of 12, you see that?
Yes.
There's an admission note that's in your handwriting, correct?
Yes.
And this is information that you gained during your conversation with Mr. Martin?
This is like the closing statement. This is like the note asking after all these questions, is there anything else you would like me to write down?
Did Mr. Martin at any point tell you that he heard or saw or had any hallucinations? Excuse me.
Yes, he verbalized he hears and sees hallucinations, similar things.
And he told you he had those daily, correct?
Yes.
Was that a statement he made to you during your intake process with him?
Yes, that was the last statement he said before we finished.
And you also, in that very same paragraph there, admission note, you state that it's a 22-year-old male, African-American male on 5150 DTO/DTS. What does that stand for?
Danger to others and danger to self.
And then in parentheses it says EXP, which is expired.
Expiration.
Okay, and then you have a date of 9/18/15, and then looks like a time frame, or at least a time in military time, but it's cut off on my copy.
Correct. Yes.
So it says the numbers 20 show, and then it looks like there are numbers that are supposed to be after that. Is that
So
correct?
something 8 p.m.
Something 8 p.m. And so, as you mentioned earlier, that would be the time that the 5150 would expire, correct?
Yes.
You also have written, due to physically and verbally aggressive towards mom and brother. Yes?
Yes.
Is that information that Mr. Martin gave you?
No, that is on his hold.
That was on his hold?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did Mr. Martin ever tell you that he suffered physical abuse by anybody?
Yes, he did.
What did he tell you?
He says he has a history of physical abuse 3 years ago.
Did he tell you who abused him?
A stranger. A friend of a friend.
And did he tell you whether or not he reported that to anyone?
And never reported except to mom.
And then you mentioned in there the headache that he talked to you about and the pain scale of 10 out of 10. And then did you give him Tylenol?
We were waiting the Tylenol, and at that time it looks like it was never administered, so he probably didn't take it.
After you finished this intake assessment, what happened with Mr. Martin? Was he put into a room or a bed?
Yeah, usually, this looks like it was almost midnight. It was at 11, so he probably showed his room and went to sleep.
And when you have a patient that verbalizes that he hears and sees hallucinations, similar things daily, is that something that you report to the doctor?
We endorse it to the morning shift to inform the doctor.
And is that something that you did personally?
Me personally, no. That's not my, the doctor comes in the morning.
Okay. And so is your job with Mr. Martin finished once you complete this assessment?
Up until 7:30 when I clock out.
Do you give any care to him after completing and taking information from him?
Aftercare, no.
Did you ever administer any medication to Mr. Martin during his stay?
It looks like I gave him a Celexa before bed.
How do you spell that, the court reporter?
Actually, no, that's incorrect. That looks like it was crossed out because I put my initials. So no, me did not give any, but this is his medication. So it's crossed out. It was error. It was only a one-time tablet for the morning.
Can you spell the name of the medication?
Oh, C-E-L-E-X-A.
Thank you. And I'm looking at a page that says start and stop 9/16/15 at 9:30. Alexa,
Correct.
and then nurse verify AA.
Yeah, that's saying that that's the medicine he's going to be taking.
Okay, but those are your initials, correct?
Yes.
And it says 20 milligrams, give 1 tab. And it says PO. What does that stand for?
Per oral.
And then is that in the AM for depression?
Q every morning.
And that was for depression.
Correct.
And then he was also given something else, correct?
He's supposed to in the morning.
Be given Depakote.
Correct.
And then it says ER. What does that stand for?
Extended release.
Okay, and the 200 milligrams.
Yes.
And that give 1 tablet. EO.
PO bilateral means twice a day.
And that was for mood disorder.
Correct.
And the times were for both those medications. Well, it looks like Celexa was at 9 a.m.
Correct. That's a one-time dose or morning dose.
And
So that's why it looks like I had written it for the night shift, and that was incorrect. So I had to cross it out with my initials.
And then the Depakote was also 9 a.m. Yes.
Yes.
And then a second time at 9 p.m.
Correct.
Thank you. If nothing further.
Cross, Mr. Kurz.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Nurse Arias.
Hello.
It's been a few years since this ETS hold was placed on Mr. Martin, so I understand you'll need to refer to your notes if you have to.
Yes.
Now, you said that your job is once the person has been brought into ETS, if they're admitted, then they go to see you.
Yes.
You don't have any personal knowledge of what happens before that process.
No.
There may be a diagnosis, there may not be a diagnosis.
Correct.
That's not your concern at that time.
No.
Okay. Your concern at that time is to do basically an intake to not necessarily evaluate, but as you said before, just to get data.
Correct.
Okay. And then you have a form that you fill out, and that form provides you with the data.
Yes.
We'll go over that in a moment, but one of the things I want to look at, you just mentioned a minute ago this concluding statement, I think you called it. If you look at that, please. And on that one, basically, the concluding statement, let me ask you if this is correct, and my understanding is you've got information, you receive data, and before you release the person, this is information that needs to be taken into account.
This is the information on admission that kind of gives you a general overview of where he's at.
Okay.
That very second.
Now looking at the this concluding statement where you've written down in your nice handwriting, 22-year-old African-American male. On that section, in the box on the right-hand side, you've checked off anger management. Is that yes?
Yes.
Okay. And why would you check off anger management?
When we go through the assessment, I'm talking to him and I'm asking him, what would you like to put on this paper? So I go through all the different questions and I ask, do you need housing? Do you need identification with housing placement? Do you need assistance with substance abuse? And then I go through all these checklists, and anger management was one of the checks.
So he being Brandon Martin, expressed to you that he needed help with anger management.
Yes.
Okay. And then let's go through some of the questionnaire that you did, and then we'll circle back to that concluding statement in a few moments.
Okay.
Now, in terms of this data collection by you, you have a section here, risk of harm to others. And the question is, are you having any thoughts about causing harm to others? Do you see that question now?
Oh, the care plan?
Yes, it's the question if it has risk of harm to others. It's the top of the page.
Page 1 of 15?
Okay. Do you have a bait stamp copy there? Is there a number at the bottom on the right-hand side that says 365? You provide a bait stamp copy?
No, she has the original.
Okay.
I have, is it page 1? There's one that's page 1, and then there's one that's page 4, 5.
Okay, so let's go through them page by page if we have to.
Okay.
Okay. So do you see a page that says history and symptom review?
History and symptom review.
Let me use the other. Look at page 2 of 12. Let me put this on the Alma to see if this will help refresh your memory.
You have a screen here to the left.
Communicable disease, okay. Okay, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is this the form that you're familiar with when you do the intake into the, when you interview the person on 5150 hole?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see that document in front of you that Defense Counsel gave you? Can you find the page that corresponds to that form, please?
Initial assessment. Yes. Yes, I found it.
You have it?
Yes.
Okay. Are those pages now in order?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Do you have the date stamp pages in order? If you do, we can run a copy and then just give it to her,
Yes.
just for refreshing recollection.
Yeah, I have the bait stamp copy, but Defense did not give a bait stamp copy to you.
All right.
I can email it to John.
All right, why don't you do that?
I'll ask some more questions as we go along, and we'll try and get a copy of the documentation.
Stapled.
Well, it's stapled, and that you're working off the same copy we're working off. Now, looking at this one, you have in front of you, and a moment ago we talked about the symptom review, why he was taken in. There was a physical verbal altercation between mum and brother, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then you have there under psychosis hallucinations, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And visual, and then you dash similar.
Yes.
You didn't go into any further detail about what those hallucinations were.
Usually if there's not like a quotation mark, it's just a basic answer.
Okay. So he wasn't seeing little green men, there weren't any demons on his shoulders, or he wasn't seeing, Jesus Christ throwing a touchdown in the Super Bowl.
No.
No, none of that. So, and in the next section, we looked at, it was in terms of his mood, and you have a number of sections there that you can cross a box for, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
And under the moods, there's motor agitation, that's not crossed off.
No.
Feelings of worthlessness or guilt, that's not crossed off.
No.
Insomnia, that's not crossed off.
No.
Hypersomnia, that's not crossed off.
No.
Fatigue or loss of energy.
No.
Significant weight loss.
No.
Need for more sleep.
No.
Inflated self-esteem, grandiose.
No.
More talkative, distractible.
No.
Flight of ideas, racing thoughts.
No.
Okay. Pleasure seeking.
No.
Elevated or expansive, irritable.
No.
Okay. What you did check off there was one box which says poor concentration.
Yes.
Okay. And that was it. That was data you were receiving from Brandon Martin.
Yes.
And you wrote down depression. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And depression isn't a box that you check off. It's actually something you write down.
Yes.
And that's, again, data that you got from the defendant that he was depressed.
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of anxiety, and there are several boxes there that you can check off, and of those boxes, none of them were checked by you.
No.
So none of these applied, which was excessive anxiety.
No.
Was it, recurring or recurrent distressing dreams.
No.
Recurrent or persistent thoughts.
No.
Okay. Depersonalization.
No.
Irritability.
No.
Restlessness, feeling on edge.
No.
Okay. And then if we could move to the next page. And
Is that the somatic one?
yeah, let me show you.
Yes.
You see that page?
Yes.
Okay. Are we on the same page?
Yes.
Good. And then we're just talking about somatic, which is none of the following were reported. Any palpitations?
No.
Sweating?
No.
Trembling or shaking?
No.
Okay. Any choking sensation?
No.
Chest pain or discomfort?
No.
Okay. Dizzy, unsteady, lightheaded?
No.
Okay. So from that point of view, and when we say somatic, S-O-M-A-T-I-C, what are we referring to?
More so of things that they're feeling at the time.
Okay, great. And then abuse history. Have you ever been abused by anyone? And you checked off no?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the question, are you currently being hit, kicked, slapped, or otherwise hurt by anyone? You put yes. And that's where this thing, stranger from 3 years ago?
Yes.
Okay. Did you go into any more detail about that?
Well, I did in regards to just being a family friend, and that's where it left off.
Okay. So some family friends 3 years ago, according to Mr. Martin, abused him in some manner.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Curtis, I think we have the copy.
Okay. Thank you.
Deputy will give it to her.
Great.
You can put the other one aside.
Thank you.
Now, if you look at that one, Miss Arias or Nurse Arias, on the bottom right hand of each of the pages is a stamped number, and the page we're looking at now is 364.
Yes.
And we were just talking about that section there. Now, treatment history, psychiatric history. You asked him about history of mental illness, and he referred to a cousin having mental illness.
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of any psychiatric hospitalization, the answer was no.
Yes.
Okay. And also then you go through a question of any suicide risk, and that was any present suicidal thoughts, and his answer was no.
No.
Okay. Yes, his answer was no.
No. Yes, his answer was no.
Okay, great. And then going to page 365, that's the section I was asking a moment ago, which is the risk of harm to others. You see that at the top of the page?
Yes.
And the question on the questionnaire is, are you having any thoughts about causing harm to others? And that was checked as no.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then there's a section there what you're asking about other dangerous or high-risk behaviors. You see that?
Yes.
And the answer is there is no known current behavior or history of other dangerous behaviors.
No.
So the answer is yes, it was no.
Yes, there was no.
And then looking down, then you do what's titled a mental status exam.
Yes.
And again, is this, you're asking the questions and you're receiving the answers from the person on the 5150 hold?
No, this is where it's actually me looking at him when he's talking, and then when I ask the questions, how they respond.
Okay, so and again, it's a checker box, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the first question is appearance, and the first box is neat/clean.
Yes.
And did you check that box?
Yes, I did.
Okay. The other boxes which were unchecked was disheveled. That was unchecked. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And
Malodorous.
odorous?
Malodorous?
Yes. Smelly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And that was not checked.
Correct, not.
Okay. So his appearance to you was that he was neat and clean.
Yes.
And then in terms of behavior, we have the first box, which is calm. That was not checked.
No.
Cooperative.
No.
Hostile.
No.
Agitated.
No.
Evasive.
No.
Guarded.
Yes.
Then crying.
No.
And uncooperative.
No.
Okay. So he was guarded.
He was guarded.
Was he guarded in terms of making eye contact with you or in terms of his response to your questions?
Guarded in regards to usually when I have them sitting close to me. Guarded is when they're looking at the ground.
Okay. So when not making eye contact with you, in your experience, that's an indication of being guarded.
Correct.
Okay. And then psychomotor. What do we mean, or what do you understand to be psychomotor?
That would be more of how they're displaying, how they're sitting, how they movement.
Okay. And then again, we have a number of boxes. Let's go through the boxes that were not checked first. We got moderate.
No.
Hyperactive.
No.
Restless.
No.
Fidgeting.
No.
Slow.
No.
Catonic.
No.
And then we have normal.
Yes.
So he appears to be normal in terms of his presence in front of you.
The movements, yes.
Okay. And his movement as well. He appeared to be normal.
Yes.
Okay. Now, in terms of his speech, again, we have several boxes. Let's go to the box you did check. You checked coherent.
Yes.
You were able to understand them clearly.
Yes.
There was no rambling.
No.
No pressured.
No.
No slow.
No.
No irrelevant.
No.
And no mute.
No.
Okay. And affect. Again, a number of boxes here. Let's go to the box that you did check, which is depressed.
Yes.
Okay. And did that affect seem consistent to you with the information you received from Brandon Martin that he was depressed?
Yes.
Okay. And then thought processes. And again, this mental status exam that you're going through, you're seeing him on September the 16th, 2015, close to midnight.
Yes.
Okay. And we have thought processes, logical.
Yes.
Okay. There's another box that says disorganized. That was not checked.
No.
And illogical was not checked.
No.
And then thought contents. Here we have suicidal ideation, and you have a choice of yes or no. What box was checked?
No.
Okay. Indicating he was not thinking about suicide in his mind.
No.
Yes.
Oh, yes, he was not thinking about suicide.
Thank you.
Objection calls for speculation. Motion to strike.
Did that come from him, or was that your opinion?
That comes from him.
Right, overruled. Answer will stand.
And then in terms of homicidal ideation, what box was checked there?
No.
Okay. And again, that's information that would be coming from him.
Yes.
Thank you. And then in terms of the next box, we have delusions. You see that?
Yes.
And delusions, there are, like some of these other questions, there's a number of boxes to check. We have grandiose. Was that checked?
No.
Paranoid. Was that checked?
No.
And we have non-noted. Was that checked?
Yes.
Okay. And again, was this information coming from the Brandon Martin?
Yes. This is this section is usually to find out the difference between the two. I'll ask them, do you ever have thoughts somebody is after you? And that's where the paranoia comes in.
Okay. So and you did that information.
And he said no. He said no.
He said no. And then moving on to hallucinations, that's where he made mention of visual hallucinations.
Yes.
But again, no further detail from your point of view was asked because you were collecting the data.
Correct.
Okay. Now, there's a section here dealing with intellectual and cognitive functions, and there's a question about his alertness. And we have boxes dealing with, was he lethargic?
No.
Drowsy?
No.
Confused?
No.
And then there's a box for alert.
Yes.
Was that box checked?
Yes, it was.
Indicating to you that he was alert?
He was awake and alert.
Okay. And next one after that, dealing with intellectual and cognitive functions, is was he oriented to person, place, time, situation?
Yes.
And is that something you would make an observation as to him being oriented to person, time, place, and function?
It's the question we ask him. We ask him, what's your name? Do you know where you're at? What time of the day? And then situation, why were you brought here?
Okay. So you ask him questions which are designed to see if he knows what's the place, what's the time, those kind of questions.
Yes, correct.
And when you ask those questions, did it appear to you that he was oriented to person?
Yes.
Oriented to place?
Yes, he knew where he was.
Oriented to time?
Yes.
And oriented to his situation?
Yes.
So he understood why he was there and what was going on?
Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of his intelligence, is that a question that you determine how he appears to be, or is it something he gives you?
He did. He gave me information stating about his career as a baseball player.
Okay, but I'm talking about his intelligence.
He's average.
Average?
Yeah, average.
Okay, and is that him saying I'm of average intelligence, or?
That was more so of him talking about his school.
About what?
His schooling.
His schooling, okay. So based on the fact that he did graduate from high school,
Mm-hmm.
yes?
Yes.
Okay.
College, I believe.
Now, judgment and insight, do you have any information in here that he went to college?
That was after fact.
Okay. Do you think after the fact there was some information he went to college?
This is probably from answering the questions clearly.
Okay. Would it surprise you to know that Mr. Brandon Martin did not go to college?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Okay. If you did know that, it would be in this questionnaire?
Correct, yes.
If it isn't in this questionnaire, then you don't know that to be a fact?
True.
Okay. And then in terms of judgment and insight, judgment has 4 boxes. It could be good, fair, impaired, or poor. Which one was checked?
The poor.
Okay. And was that your review of the question and answers that you'd received so far?
That was based off the the intake. Usually it's like a starting point for day one, and then we'll work our way a few days later to find out how they're doing,
Okay.
if it gets clear.
Got it. And then is that the same for impulse control,
Yes,
where the boxes are poor and poor?
correct,
Okay.
yes.
And again, what we're doing here is I mean, this is the process of the 72-hour hold, correct?
Yes,
And I don't know if you know this, but the 72-hour holds can be up to 72 hours,
Objection,
Up
lack
to.
of foundation.
Right.
if you know.
Sustained subject to foundation.
On direct examination, defense counsel asked you several questions about the 5150. Do you remember that?
yes,
He asked you questions about the 72-hour hold. Do you remember that?
yes.
Okay. He asked you when the expiration of these 5150 holds would be.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
To your knowledge, based on your experience, is it 72 hours is the maximum you can keep and you can release somebody earlier than 72 hours?
Objection, lack of foundation.
Well, in your experience, what have you seen would be the question.
It varies.
Do they always keep people 72 hours, or do sometimes people get released early?
It does. They sometimes get released early.
Okay. And again, that's why you put down the expiration is for the 72-hour hold. This is the line. You
The
can't-
maximum.
Yes, that's the maximum. But there is, as you just said, various situations.
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Redirect?
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Sari, going through that same mental status exam that the person was asking you about, specifically the part about hallucinations, you got the box checked that says visual.
Mhm.
That's on page 4 as well. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. How did you
How do I
learn that he was having visual hallucinations?
The question comes for visual hallucinations is, do you ever see anything that no one else can see?
And Mr. Martin said yes.
Yes.
Do you ask any follow-up questions?
Usually I ask what kind of things, and the answer was similar things.
Do you remember
So-
what he told you?
Similar things. It looks like it's broad.
And he told you that he sees them on a daily basis?
Yes.
And he also told you that he hears or has, I guess, verbal hallucinations as well?
Not on 365.
Not in that area, but if you recall your summary statement, you had mentioned that.
Well, let her clarify it.
Yes, verbalized, he hears and sees hallucinations, similar things daily. But that's the comment after the assessment.
And so did you recall what the question was that revolved around the verbal hallucination?
This is basically off of, is there anything you want to tell me? And this is where the paragraph is, that I see and hear things, hallucinations, similar things daily. So it was a comment after.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Mr. Curtis?
No regard, Joel.
Is the witness excused or subject to recall?
Excuse me.
Excused. You're excused. Thank you, ma'am. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and take our afternoon recess. Remind all of you not to discuss the facts of this case amongst yourselves or with anyone unrelated to the trial. No form or express any opinions until you've heard all the evidence. We'll come back at 3:15.